The foundation of his art has always been printmaking and drawing, and at 60 he's showing no signs of slowing down. Today, Tumi, Sedumedi and I put South Africa's most expensive and famous living artist, Dr. William Kentridge, and his trademark white shirt under the spotlight.
Dr. Kentridge, thank you very much for sharing your time with me tonight. So take me back to the first time you realized there's such a thing as art.
I think that all children draw. Most, if you look at any child, give them a piece of paper and they'll draw. What the difference was that I just forgot to stop. Most children kind of stop, and I went on, and it, throughout childhood, as children do, and usually when you're adolescents, you stop. But I went to drawing lessons as an adolescent, life drawing classes in private, sort of small art school, the Johannesburg Art Foundation, while I was studying at the university, and somehow it just continued. At some point I thought I would be an actor, and I failed at that. At some point I thought I should make feature films, but I failed at that. And the only thing that kept going consistently was making drawings and pictures.
Now here you are growing up in this liberal house. I mean, your parents are both lawyers and anti-apartheid lawyers at that. When were you first aware that you can use your art to fight this injustice that's going on?
It would be hard to say. I mean, my parents were both, I come very much from a legal family, my parents are both lawyers, but they had friends who were artists. Cecil Scottness, Bill Ainsley, Matthew Whitman. And so it was not like I didn't think, an artist has to be someone in a garret in Paris with a beret, starving in the corner. I was aware that artists had houses and studios, and I saw Dumile when I was 14 or 15, saw him at work in his room, so I understood it was a real and possible activity. And that was important. At high school and at university I was very involved with student politics, and then it seemed very much that the work had to be at the service of the political demands of the time. So in theatre projects, it was very much working with Junction Avenue Theatre Company and sometimes with trade union organizations and shop stewards. And at a certain point I discovered, in fact, there was a dislocation between trying to pretend I knew what other people needed to be taught, and saying, in fact, the only way I can work is to work with my own understanding of the world and hope that other people will understand it. But to think on behalf of others, to say, what will a shop steward understand, was wrong. They always understand much more than you assume, and people are always smarter and more able to jump and understand context than you would expect.
And how long did that process take? The process that informs you that you have to relate things as you understand them?
Well, I think it came, I was at university doing politics and African history, and then I had some years at the Art Foundation as a teacher, first as a scholar and then as a teacher. And then I had this big break where I thought, I do not have the right to be an artist. I've got nothing to say. And that's when I went to theatre school in Paris to try to be an actor, and then when that failed, tried to work in the film industry making films. And then came back, and when I came back I thought, well, if I'm coming back to drawing, it has to be on very different terms. So that gap of about 3 years was very important for me. And the irony was that, in fact, when I stopped trying to think I need to think on behalf of other people, in fact, other people could respond much more closely to the work when it was made for myself.
So here you are, you failed at theatre, you failed at filmmaking, but somehow, to this day, these three are connected.
They came back. I mean, obviously I've come back working with drawing. I suddenly discovered I was working with Handspring Puppet Company, so I was back in theatre and directing again. Then I discovered I started animating the film, so I was making films again. So all the experience of those fields which I'd felt I'd failed in, and it felt a real failure, painful failure. It wasn't, I'm not joking about that. But in fact, there was a lot of background in those areas that made me feel comfortable working in theatre or in film as well. And also when I was younger, everybody said to me, you need to do one thing. If you want to do drawings, do drawings. If you want to do theatre, do theatre. But if you try to do them both, you will always be an amateur. You'll be a dilettante. You'll be bad at both of them. And it took me a long time to understand what bad advice that was. And in fact, the only hope for the drawing was what came into it from the theatre, and the only hope from the theatre was what came into it from the filmmaking. So there's a fertilization of the different fields from each other. There's images made for a drawing that come into the theatre. The images I need for a particular scene in a theatre that suddenly open up a whole new way of making drawings. So this mixture, this bastardy of forms is important.
How much would you say spirituality plays a role in the life that you lead and the work that you do?
I don't think of it as spirituality. I think of it as something that's not just random chance, it's not just the I Ching, and it's not clearly working it out in your head in advance. It's trusting that there are knowledges we have inside us, there are insights which we recognize when they emerge. So there's a strategy, or there needs to be strategies for allowing that openness to the world. And for some people that has to do with a spiritual realm. For me, I would describe it in more psychoanalytic terms as an unconscious realm.
Mm-hmm. There's something about Johannesburg that's very close to your heart. I mean, Bertram's as well is in there somewhere. What is it about the city that you love so much?
Well, I love the fact that it's a young city, that, as you say, I'm about to hit 60, not quite yet, a few months to go. But that means that I will have been alive in the city for about 40% of its existence. Now, if you're a Roman, you've been there, the city's been there for 4,000 years, you're there for this tiny section. So there's a sense of the city as family in its transformations. Secondly, as someone who works with animation, it's a great city because it's a city that keeps on erasing itself. You know, both literally the mine dumps get rubbed out by high pressure hoses, like a drawing of a mountain. No other place does your mountain disappear. And the buildings shift and change. You know, in the years since the end of apartheid, there's this extraordinary change in the city in terms of people from other parts of Africa coming in. It's a much more kind of cosmopolitan, in an African sense, city. And there's its remarkable music life, the range of people that go through it, and the fact that it's a city in crisis. It really is. I mean, it's both, as we know, for every great thing that happens in the city, there are terrible things. For every success story, there are disasters, both. The optimistic and the pessimistic future unroll at the same time. And if you're in the field of writing or music or film or the arts or drawing, it's an incredibly rich, provocative place to be.